It's time.
It's by far and away the most action-packed sequence we've done.
It involves a much heavier visual effects component because of the giants and the mammoths and the wall.
It's just one of those episodes that we've been excited for quite some time, and then when we finally saw it put together, it's just exceeded expectations.
In the great tradition of Game of Thrones, episode 9's, it's the episode where a lot of stuff goes down.
The biggest armies ever assembled. 100 of us, 100,000 of them. Very exciting stuff.
It's carnage.
It's just a huge production.
If you give a guy a sword and say, like, just play around, it can't be better.
Episode 409 is similar to episode 209, the Blackwater episode. It's contained to one location. That said, it's much more involved than Blackwater was.
The big challenge is just finding time to do everything, because there's so many action beats that you want, and the action beats are always the most time intensive.
It's so logistically complicated. There's so many aspects to it, and I've not really done VFX on this level before.
From a planning perspective, it was just completely epic is the only way to describe it.
The production necessitates us to actually plan it as you would plan any battle, to figure out who does what to whom when.
You have to stick with a plan to be able to provide the element that the visual effect needs and been prepping for the past 3 months.
The episode breaks down into several different elements. I mean, we have the Castle Black battle, which is a very practical element. It's all on set here. You know, we have this beautiful set and we're using it to maximum effect. Then we have a sequence just on top of the wall, for which they've built a brand new set. And then we have a very strong green screen element, which we're shooting in a field with this army coming out of the forest.
There's a big clearing for the tree line, and that has a 400-foot by 30-foot green screen.
The key to making this thing work is communication and making sure that everybody knows, everybody's on the same page. You know, and that boils down to the script, you know, in a very literal way.
You're reading this script and Mag the Mighty is riding this mammoth.
We shoot the human element separately, then we shoot the giants separately, and then we add the mammoth in on top of that. What makes it so complicated is that it's 3 different scales. That we have regular human scale, we have giant scale, which is that we have very tall actors playing the giants, but even then they're still only half scale, so we have to make them twice the size.
The production cast the tallest and the second tallest guy in the UK to play the giants. And it wasn't that we needed the height necessarily, it was that the way a tall person moves is different than the way you and I move. Mag, King of the Giants, the actor is nearly 8 feet tall, but his body moved in a certain way because of that, and so he would scale up believably.
And then the mammoth itself, well, that's going to be 100% CG, so that's a different scale altogether, and that needs to be incorporated as the last element. It's easily the most complicated thing I've ever shot.
The first consideration when you think about shooting a big action scene involving a mammoth or anything that's not actually going to be there on the day is how do you keep extras from running through it? How do you keep a space open in a big action scene to insert the missing creature?
We have this giant space frame, or as Neil calls it, the cheese wedge.
We talked about putting it on a vehicle, on a turntable or something, and then I said, why don't we just make it with legs and 4 guys pick it up and carry it around.
It looked absolutely ridiculous, but it was exactly the right thing.
In post, the guys can see exactly where it's moving, and when they build the digital mammoth to go over that.
How to get the giant riding on a mammoth? Well, we created a motion base with a buck on it that is sort of like a mechanical bull. It was a section of mammoth with fur on it that the giant in costume sat on, and the camera is motion controlled so that when you put it all together, you've got a giant riding a mammoth and charging at the ice wall.
That's how it's going to affect the characters. They've never seen anything like that. They've never seen fire like that before. It's just the scale is awe-inspiring.
One of the terrific notes that Dan and David had early on was, how do you see where all the players are? And what Joe came up with was this fantastic shot that starts with the Thens dousing their fire and cutting to a very high-angle shot, traveling, looking down over the Thens as they're leaving their camp, over the top of Castle Black, over the top of the wall, and across to reveal the wildlings coming out of the tree line and the greatest fire that ever was.
As Mance Rayder says, the greatest fire the North has ever seen is raging north of the wall, so we have to add in all this burning sky and clouds and things in the background, and that's where VFX comes in incredibly handy.
The greatest fire is made of a lot of elements taken from photography of real forest fires. There's some CG fire involved, but it's probably 70 or 80 layers just of practical fire. And then, the layers of smoke that tell you the scale, which is the size and the distance of the fire. So if the smoke is barely moving, you know it's really big and really far away.
There hasn't been an attack on the wall of this scale in thousands of years, and you definitely want the audience to feel that. It's the biggest army in Westeros history coming for Jon and for his friends.
There were enough wildlings to get all of the medium and tight coverage, and the rest of it is why we had a 400-foot green screen. We would shoot multiple plates of the several hundred wildlings that we had, and we added the other 999,000 wildlings.
The first wave are the wildlings attacking as if they're going to climb the wall.
All the business in front of the gate was handled in the photography by Stewart's team. What we did was connect the wall to the practical set, drop the digital barrels from the top.
There's two types of barrels. There's barrels full of stones and ice and barrels full of oil. We've done some different explosions to create those effects.
We bury mortars in the ground, air mortars normally, so we can give a big blast of whatever we want up out of the ground and just create a much bigger, safer explosion.
The first one we used a lot of fake ice and put some snow in there. We had lightweight materials because that was being fired by compressed air at people.
This is like shrapnel going to cut through the people and they get shredded. So that is really just stunt guys taking bullet hits, as it was fake, just dropping fast and hard to the ground. We're going to do fire barrels dropping. These will be CG barrels, but we will have naphthalene fire bursters on the ground to simulate the fire.
The second ones are the fire ones, which are various types of fuel in there to create fireballs and fire debris landing around on the ground.
Some Romanian stunt guys flew in just to be engulfed in flames, and they were awesome.
We'll glue them up, ready to go, and hopefully that will catch them and they will go up. They'll have the fire underwear on and gel on their faces.
Quite often in an explosion, everything goes up. But to make it last longer and to give a more of a wall of fire, we have charges that go out in a fan shape. The explosion goes straight out towards the camera and then goes up.
This scene then continues to one of them being dragged by the mammoth. This we'll just do on a rig, set him fire, and he'll just hold on for a certain distance onto the rope as if being dragged.
We put a rig onto the back of a pickup truck just to get the height, the elevation so it's the right angle, as if the rope is attached to the mammoth harness, and that's what it'll look like when you see it.
Action! We did ourselves a favor in only lighting the mammoth's butt on fire, which is probably 30 feet of fire, so we didn't have to render a bunch of burning fur.
The battle this season takes place at the base of the wall, it takes place on top of the wall, and we've got explosions happening all over.
So far in all the episodes, the top of the wall has only been hinted at as a few trenches and this, that, and the other. So this time around, we need something a lot more elaborate, and we've built this massive set down at the Paint Hall in Belfast.
We've done sections at the top of the wall before, but it's only ever been a much smaller scale, and I think this is a set they wanted to build for season 1, and now we're on season 4, and it's a very important sequence. They just went out, spent the money and built it. It's a huge set built, raised above the ground. It's got a network of tunnels, like the top of the wall, as someone has imagined would have.
What we have is a fantastic sort of series of ice trenches, basically, where the battle is fought.
You can lose yourself up there. The set is so big that, you know, you actually, you can get lost in it.
there's a face to those trenches so that you see over, down to the 700 feet, presumably, of what would take you down to Castle Black or across to the north. The thing about Castle Black is it has a very distinct look. It has very distinct colours, very distinct sort of use of timbers. And so we add the type of timbers that are typical to Castle Black that will hopefully, convince everybody that these timbers were hoisted up there by the Night's Watch.
We've made some sort of barrel ramps. We've obviously got pitch barrels and pitch pots. We've got braziers and flambeaux up there because when they get the arrows, they've got to put them into the fire and fire them. We've got a fantastic horn. We're going to snow it up and ice it up and weather it like it's been up there for a long time.
It's probably maybe 4 or 5 feet, kind of height-wise and lengthwise, so it's quite a substantial horn. I don't know if anybody's tried blowing it yet, so I don't know what it'll sound like.
The good thing about the top of the wall set is he's actually on a raised platform. I imagine so they can get a lot of low-angled shots. So to be up there, away from the rest of the crew on the floor, you do feel like you're engaged in something up there completely separate from everything that's going on around you. And you need a decent head for heights while you're up there because it's actually quite a high set. So you don't feel very secure because you're having to act literally on precipices like that.
They've got a green screen underneath, and you look down the edge of the wall, and you've got these dots of snow that have come from the snow machines. And actually, when you think about it, those dots are probably the size of people, and you get a bit of a vertigo feeling, and you look at it and you go, wow, this, it's not difficult to imagine.
The top of the wall is a real united effort for special effects, visual effects, art department, camera, etc. Visual effects is merely extending the set, so with views where we see either direction along the length of it, obviously we're extending it.
We're in a studio, we're in a stage, a massive set. We've got barrels rolling off the top of the wall on fire.
We drop rolled barrels off a system there, and one of them gets stuck at the end. So one of the stunt guys, as the Night Watch, will go out as if he's trying to prod the barrel off, and this will explode up in his face. Next, we're going to have a couple of Night Watch that are just eased out on ropes so they can fire their arrows straight down.
We have these archers who, in order to fire vertically down the wall, they are lowered over the edge on kind of bungees.
They're belayed from behind by another Night Watch guy, and one of these Night Watch guys will get hit by one of the explosions, let go of the rope, and the other guy will just fall to his death below. And then that would be continued probably on a green screen element of him falling 700 feet.
When you start researching medieval fighting and the things that people have created, there's a lot of horrible genius involved.
The sequence involving the scythe, which is this crazy weapon that Dan and David came up with.
We dug our heels in on that one, cut some corners elsewhere to be able to afford it.
There's a huge chain with a blade on it that swings down and literally decimates these guys on the wall.
It's just big and heavy and ice covered, and it doesn't get released very often, and it makes mincemeat of anybody it hits.
We will do a climbing section and reactions, and then this will be replaced with blood bursts, and this comped together with visual effects will take them off.
It's very effective, but I would think it would be a bitch to reset.
Hoist her up! Hoist her up! Yeah!
We joined the wildling attack on Castle Black kind of mid-attack. They just storm in, and we were with them with the camera, running down the road.
Screaming and fighting in like full energy all the time.
I was in the middle of it, and it completely was like, wow, is this really going? It was crazy, yeah.
You're so focusing on what you have to do, then you're totally oblivious to like the 100 people swishing past your ear.
We built the castle in season 1, and it stood up well over the last 4 years at the time, but to actually physically climb it is not actually practical, so we had to do a fair number of cheats. We added wooden struts to places where we could climb up. We used grappling hooks to climb over, which are then tied and anchored in the other side once we'd thrown them up.
I'm such a bad climber that Paul had to come underneath and just like push me up, so he had to be out of shot. Like, I was climbing, but I really wasn't.
There are kind of 3 worlds in this episode. There's the foot of the wall in the north, there's the top of the wall, and there's the courtyard. And when the giant shoots the giant-sized torpedo arrow, it picks the Night's Watchman up, carries him through the air over the top of the wall and down into the middle of the courtyard where the battle's raging all around him. It was just such a smart way on Neil Marshall's part to connect the worlds in one continuous series of shots.
The wall is 700 feet high, So regular arrows from the wildlings below can't reach, but giant arrows from the giants can reach. And it was my idea to give one of them a bow and arrow, and he's able to shoot to the top of the wall with that, which the regular wildlings can't do. So it's kind of like heavy artillery.
Stewart's team blew part of the set apart with the right force and trajectory as if it had been hit by a giant arrow.
Very difficult effect because there was no arrow there to blow the top off. The arrow was added in post. So we had to make the top blow off and be a repeatable effect.
The Night Watch poke their head over to see if they can fire down again after that. It's followed by a second arrow from the Giant, which lifts him and takes him up. For this, we will be using a jerk rig.
For the guy landing with Dongo's arrow in him, we built a rig which had the arrow that was going through him into the ground was steel.
This is a special effects rig which they developed. It's just a hydraulic rig on a plate.
We have an air ram, basically, buried in the ground 2 foot in solid rock, which wasn't easy.
We have our stunt performer. He lays on that, we dress the costume around him, and we just have to make sure that his action feels real and believable.
My most difficult location to shoot in would have to be Castle Black Courtyard.
I'll never forget the first time that they took me out to Castle Black. Such a beautiful, well-conceived set. And just seeing the sequences that Neil's been shooting over the past few nights, it's fantastic.
It's so real, it's so convincingly put together. When you're standing in here, you could be in the Himalayas, you could be in Westeros. It's such a real environment.
It's very detailed, you know, everything feels like it's of the world.
It's enormous. It's there. It exists.
It is gigantic, and there's everything that you need in here. I mean, you could live here. I mean, the rain doesn't come through. It's brilliant. There's no leaks.
The gates work, everything, the walls, it's just, there are even rooms back there. Even the lift, the elevator, is a fully working elevator.
In season 1, me and John Bradley got stuck in that lift, so it doesn't always work.
If they want to spend the money on frightening us like that, then so be it, really.
This is a great set. It's one of the best sets I've ever been on, because that's what this world is about. It's the northern edge of civilization. It's rough, it's grim, and when it rains up here, it gets grim.
Based on my past experience, you come to Game of Thrones, you come here to Magramorn, you have to expect the worst. You know, we filmed for nearly 3 weeks of solid rain on Blackwater, and what happened this time was we kind of got 3 weeks worth of rain on Monday night, and the whole set flooded while we were filming in it.
It started off as a puddle, then it turned into a pond, and people were literally wading through, you know, water deep up to your shins.
We had the pumps going, and it was just torrential. It was just unbelievable.
We couldn't afford to stop shooting, so basically we said that we just go for it. In post-production now, with the miracle of technology, you can smooth it out.
Painting out rain is a really tricky thing. You know, adding rain, not so bad. Adding snow, not so bad. Removing rain, tough.
You will not fall tonight! I'm soaked through from head to toe, but I've never had so much fun getting completely wet and dirty.
I mean, it is for real, this weather, you know, but it's great for the show, and, you know, there's a real camaraderie.
We're all in the same situation, everybody. You're always getting wet, and it's not like you're sitting in a comfortable trailer.
We don't have caravans just off set here and the actors lounging around. Once we come up in the trucks into the quarry, we're stuck up here under these medieval buildings, and there's no real restroom.
The extras, you know, they get stuck in just as anybody else does. The Northern Irish local lads are not very precious at all, and they're always up for a laugh, and they facilitate the scene fantastically.
They get a lot more responsibility than extras on some shows, because they're doing a lot of action beats and they're on camera quite a bit, not just, you know, in the deep background, but right there in the front.
I think there's about 40 or 50 of them today, and there's 20 stunt guys training them. So for the last couple of weeks, they've taken them from being enthusiastic but with no idea how to handle a sword into somebody who can use a sword. And the credibility of the scene just goes way up.
Once you call action, it really feels like, you know, as close as you can be to a real medieval battle. So.
We definitely, when we're writing the scripts, try to be as descriptive as possible to give Paul and CC and our fight team as much story tools to work with, but then we let them have it, and you know, they know what they're doing. They're the best in the world at this.
From the writers at the beginning, we have the basis of the fights, what they want to incorporate. Then my swordmaster, CC, develops those fights a bit more.
The stunt guys have put something together, I'll go around and have a little look at it and maybe change it. Too many kicks or too many spins or whatever. I don't like too many spins. Not for this show anyway, it's the realism.
When we shoot the big wide shots of everyone fighting together in the courtyard, it blows you away. It's difficult to understand how everyone keeps track of what everyone is doing.
With the main fights, we had 2 weeks to do that, on and off when we could get hold of Kit, Jon Snow, Sir Alistair, Owen, Tormund, Christoph, he come in as well.
We have been rehearsing a lot in the stunt tent many days.
CC is a joy. His managerial skills are pretty good too. When you've got 60 people running around with swords, you need somebody who's in control.
This year was a little bit different. I built the fights with the actors. I had in mind what I wanted to do, but I wanted it to suit them, and it worked really, really well.
Cici and I tried to create Tormund's fighting style. It's a mixture between regular sword fight and capoeira and a very Viking style, like a berserk. This is maybe one of the most ambitious fights I've ever done.
The fighting in these conditions is tough because it's literally a lot of wet wood that you're running along.
It's a huge amount of work because if you miss one beat, bam, you have a sword in your head.
Christopher's very light on his feet for a big guy, and we put the roll in as well, which was nice.
He's almost like a ballet dancer when you actually see behind the scenes what he can do.
He's an enthusiastic guy, and he's a Viking, basically. He's jumping in the air and throwing it around, and we got to start taking it a little easier.
It was Owen's idea to hold onto the post to swing round, just to add a little bit of life to it there.
The fight moves are always amazing, they're always executed incredibly, but they never lose sight of the story, and they never lose sight of what the scene dramatically is trying to achieve.
We've set up Thorn as he's a bit of a son of a bitch.
He's made these guys' lives hell, but now their backs against the wall, they're being invaded. It's to the death, and it's very much his moment. Yeah.
With me! What we liked about the character was the idea that you can be a really horrible person in some respects, but also maybe very brave.
Owen's performance of Thorn really makes you feel viscerally what Thorn is made of.
He steams into this battle, and then he singles out Tormund, and they engage in this like absolutely ferocious sword fight.
Well, the fight is two bad guys meeting each other, and it's going to be interesting to see who they will sympathize with.
There's one shot midway through the episode, which is a 360. The camera goes all the way around, and you see about 5 different action beats, and they all had to be timed out perfectly.
I knew I had to do a big action sequence in here, and I had so many ideas of what to do. It is a 360-degree set. There is no gaps. There's nothing to suggest it's not real. So I thought, well, let's do something that encompasses that somehow.
It's such a wonderful tying together of every person who's in that space who means something to us.
There's a certain point in the plot that will lead it from Jon Snow, taking Ygritte on the wall, taking Tormund, taking Styr, and come around to Samwell and actually, tell a story in the shot as well.
It's always quite nerve-wracking to do a shot that is so complicated and takes in so many actors and so many stunts, because if you get it wrong, everybody has to do it again.
CC Smith, who designed that fight and designed every bit of it, had it down to a T.
There was a lot to do there. We spent a morning rehearsing that, and we did a few changes on the night, but the guys on the crane were amazing.
For me, the biggest challenge is to do something that's gonna stay, that is gonna be strong enough, that it's not gonna be cut out. So the way we did it is like make it fast.
My biggest concern was whether the camera was going to hit anybody, because the speed that it had to travel, it's a very heavy object on the end of a crane, and if somebody gets in its way, they're going to get hurt.
It takes a bit of rehearsals to make everything work, because there's a lot of things going on.
My first AD, Mark, he just called out a series of numbers. Each segment of the shot had a number, and each number, when you call out the number, that's their cue to do what they're going to do.
Usually Mark Taylor, the AD, is calling out numbers. He's saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and he must have made it to 19 with this shot, because there were that many individual action cues to take you around the circle.
You have to start the process of people fighting, the people behind are not fighting, otherwise they'll be exhausted by the time the camera gets to them and the fighting to die down.
When you know that the camera's swished past you, you can then look at everything else happening because you know that you're no longer kind of being watched. And it was just brilliant seeing everyone start up at the right time, and it's like, right, now it's you, now it's you, now it's you, and it was real teamwork.
Every department was absolutely on their game, and it gives you just such pride to pull off something like that when everybody's so on it.
There are dozens of fights literally happening all around all the time, especially once you get down into the courtyard, and they all needed to be choreographed and synced with one another. But obviously Kit's the centerpiece of the episode.
At a certain point in the battle, when it looks like, you know, all hope is lost for Castle Black, Jon Snow comes down in the elevator and he kind of just literally jumps out into the fray.
Neil is one of the most efficient directors I've ever worked with. He knows what he wants and he gets it. And he puts a lot of trust into you as an actor to turn up to a scene and know what you're doing.
It's very rare to find somebody who is both has the acting chops that Kit has and is a real action hero. I mean that in the best way, like he's the complete package.
He's like Errol Flynn or something. He's so graceful and balletic. When you're watching it, you just admire how elegant somebody can be on their feet whilst hacking somebody to pieces.
Kit takes it like a duck to water. He's absolutely superb in his fighting style and being able to remember all the moves.
Kit and Yuri worked so well together, and it's the first time Yuri's really done something like that huge axe.
He's a big man with a big axe.
I never fight with a huge axe, and I'm a tall guy, and it's pretty hard for me, you know, to use all my long arms and legs. It was just working every day.
That fight is a double-edged axe versus Jon Snow's long claw, and it's sort of a more powerful man versus maybe a quicker man. So it's quite an interesting fight to choreograph. By the end, you see the more powerful man start winning. He's got a weapon which can easily disarm a sword. It's built for that, and Jon Snow gets disarmed.
Poor old Jon, he's getting his face smashed in and he gets thrown through this fire.
Kit wanted to go through it, but we had a double to go through.
Insurance implications we have to have the stunt double to throw through. We can't throw our actor actually through the fire.
And in the end of the fight, he has to resort to somewhat dirty tactics. I take his leg out with a hammer, and the final killing blow is a hammer to the top of the skull.
It's a ball-peen hammer that Jon Snow uses to kill him, and it ends up buried in the top of his skull. We have a prosthetic where it's sticking out the top of his head and all his blood pours down.
That will be all the prosthetics here. Then they will make the prosthetics of this scars on that prosthetic of my head.
What's interesting at the end of the Steer fight is he's learned that the honourable way to fight is not necessarily the way you win, which is a big part of Game of Thrones. So to see Jon learning that means it bodes better for him than it does for his father, I think. If he's willing to spit in someone's eye, he might actually have a chance of making it through this world.
This battle is one that we've been planning for a long time, and we have these actors that we love, Joseph Alton as Pip and Mark Stanley as Gren, and while neither of the characters die in the books, it felt like we had to have some casualties amongst the people that we really care about here.
We knew we were going to lose Ygritte and some of the wildlings, but we really needed to lose some people on the Night's Watch side that we had grown to care about over the last few seasons.
This episode is a regular slaughterhouse. We're killing off a few favourites.
When I read the episodes, I got to episode 9, so you're reading it through and you're turning every page going, do I make it? Who makes it? And you're thinking, they're gonna bump some people off, and then they kill Pip, and you're like, oh no, man.
As an actor, my favourite part of the episode was obviously the death scene, because I got to do a lot more in it.
Joseph really nailed it from the first take, and trying to shoot something in a very raw way of not controlling it too much. Just standing back and just letting these two characters who've spent the past 3 seasons together sort it out amongst themselves, that one of them is dying and the other one is helpless.
2 or 3 times we kind of rehearsed it, and then we just kind of went for it.
He really made it quite easy for me to feel that slipping away.
When actors deliver performances that good, it becomes painful to watch.
People talk about the violence in this show, but we treat it very maturely. We don't trivialise anything. And the violence in that particular scene will be very, very shocking. You get to see the physical toll that an arrow through the throat really takes on somebody, they bleed to death in agony.
Great scene to do, dying scene. Played a great part. A tricky part, lining an arrow up with your entry and exit. Never easy to do. Our part in it's really pumping blood. The hose was up through the leg and then up through the costume and then into the prosthetic. And our part in that was making it go as gory as possible, pouring on blood.
The outer gate won't hold. Take 5 men. Hold the inner gate. Hold the gate. If they make it through.
Gren's battle with the giant, and you think, yeah, he's going to make it, and it just says you find them both dead. I was like, no, man, you can't kill Gren.
When I read it, I was like, the bastards, they've written me out, I couldn't believe it. But then I thought, well, if we're ever going to go, might as well go in a heroic way. To be fair, fighting the King of the Giants, I'll take that.
Gren dies bravely holding the gate against Magnemite, one of the great giants that Mance has unleashed.
We find ourselves at the inner gate, and the giant has taken away the outer gate, so we're looking at a distance of about 20 metres. We're screaming at such high range and putting everything into it that we thought that our voices would go.
The way that Neil seamlessly weaves all these pieces together to create the perfect illusion that this 14-foot tall person is charging down a tunnel at a bunch of 5'6" people is very impressive.
At times, the giant.
I am the shield! The guard surrounds me! I place my life and honor in the Night's Watch! For this night and all the nights to come!
Genuinely sad for us when we kill off characters. We're not doing it. It's not fun. Except in the rare occasions, but for the most part, it's actually really depressing.
Obviously, we have a major moment in this episode with the loss of Ygritte.
She's been talking all season that she wants to kill Jon Snow, and how dare he abandon me in the way that he did, how dare he abuse the trust in the way that he did. But of course, when she sees him, she can't control the feelings of love that she has for Jon Snow, and that's a real fight within her.
As much as she feels betrayed by Jon, and as much fury as she feels, there's also real love there.
She has to love him a lot to be as angry at him as she is.
It's all in the script. I mean, Dave and Dan are, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, intelligent writers, and so everything is there as an actor. What you need is right there on the page.
He's just come through a huge battle. He's almost died. He turns around and he sees the one person he's ever truly loved. I think even though she's pointing an arrow at him, even though they're in the middle of a battle, there's something incredibly joyous about that moment.
I think for her, hesitating seeing Jon Snow is purely, oh my God, the last time I saw you, you were running away from me, and here you are. And I thought I didn't love you anymore, but I do.
He doesn't care if that arrow drills through his chest. Right at that moment, he's happy. Until he's not.
And then bam.
It's a kind of bittersweet ending for them both. It was never going to end happily, and one of them was going to die, I think.
I think she's incredibly brave about it. She's realising that she's going to die, and she's thinking about the cave. She's like, why the hell did we leave that cave?
The shot of Jon cradling Ygritte in his arms is my favorite shot of the episode.
We very, very rarely do slow motion. We don't like slow motion. It tends to feel self-conscious, but this one shot, when we saw it in the director's cut, we loved it.
What Neil and David Franco did with this shot, where it just completely brings you into Jon's consciousness, and you're experiencing this moment as he's experiencing it. It's beautiful and heartbreaking.
For Jon, it was incredibly sad. And Rose Leslie won't be in Thrones anymore, and it's sort of, you kind of got that kind of baggage along with it as well.
I think the idea that Ygritte is gone from the world is almost as difficult for Jon as the idea that Rose Leslie is no longer on the show is difficult for us.
When you've worked with these people for so long and so closely, and then you know that this inevitable death is coming, it's very hard, actually.
We've all grown together and acted in some great scenes together. I couldn't have asked for any more than that.
Given the fact that this show seems to do episode 9s quite well, it's actually very, very flattering that they think that we can hold that attention in that narrative for an hour. It really makes you bring your A game to it.
It really is a huge team effort, especially on an episode of this scope and this much importance in the overall narrative of our story. And it's been an absolute joy to work on.
From the moment we saw Neil's first director's cut, we knew he had done a fabulous job. I mean, that's not always the case with things that are very effects driven. Sometimes you don't know exactly what you've got until the shots start to come in, and it's been a joy watching the shots come in. But the bones were so solid from the beginning that we always knew that this one was going to be pretty intense.
We've seen a lot of battles. We haven't seen too many battles with giants and woolly mammoths pulling gates off. And we really wanted it. It's just one of the things that sets this world apart from all the other worlds we've seen. And you know, it's just kudos to the crew and congratulations to the best VFX team in the business.